Good afternoon. Welcome to Tuesday Tidbits with Jerry Hinkle and me, Trinity. We are continuing on in Galatians. We went over chapter 1 last week. We're going to go over chapter 2 this week. I'll start with the chapter intro, give you some context, and then we'll just do our back and forth like we normally do. Okay? So, for so many people who come after Paul, fidelity to God's call and freedom in Jesus means preaching, teaching, and evangelizing outside of church law. Crucified with Jesus takes on new meaning: excommunication, loss of friendships, social alienation. But this exclusive commitment to Christ's call becomes a deep source of strength and faith. Next, Paul turns to the Galatians. If circumcision offered Paul, already a Jew of privilege, no special status in Jesus, why should the Gentiles turn to this practice? Paul's concern has to do with the sufficiency of Jesus' work on the cross. To assume that one has to adopt circumcision as a Gentile after Christ has already been crucified is to say that Jesus' work didn't quite cut it. Furthermore, after Jesus' work, traditional status distinctions no longer hold sway, whether based on gender, ethnicity, or economic status. Jesus' work on the cross made a way for Gentiles as Gentiles to inherit the promises made to Abraham. They do not have to become Jews to be Christians. Christian identity begins and ends with Jesus' faithfulness, not with food or circumcision or the like. Christian practices of love and compassion dissolve all status. What?
Oh, go ahead. You got some more?
No, that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I've got this over here, but.
Okay, well, I thought you had something there. That's why I took it.
What do you want?
Okay, what was you reading at first?
I started right there. But I said, instead of that, I said people.
Read it. Do it again. I want you to listen to what she's saying, that this book is saying here. Go ahead.
Okay. For so many people who come after Paul, fidelity to God's call and freedom in Jesus means preaching, teaching, and evangelizing outside of church law.
Okay, right there. Don't you stop right there.
Okay.
Okay, evangelizing and teaching outside of the church walls.
Law.
Excuse me. Okay.
That's okay.
We're saying walls too.
Well, yeah, I mean,
law puts you on walls.
Yeah.
I want you to focus on that. You know, there's more to being a child of God, a Christian, than sitting on the pew Sunday morning or Wednesday night or Sunday night and just, sitting there. Your life is a spectacle. Paul teaches that, the whole time. He talks about him and his group, how they are spectacles to people. You are a spectacle. Now, you might think, well, it's just me. I don't care what anybody thinks. Well, it's not just you.
No.
King David, when he got with Bathsheba, and all that came about, he said, well, it just affects me and nobody else. Well, it did. It affected him. It affected his family. It affected
your
everything.
Choices affect everything around you. And it's outside of even just your immediate family. There's a ripple effect. You ever throw a rock in pond, river, whatever, and the ripples, and they just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. They spread out. Your choices, while it will affect you and your immediate family, it also affects other people around you. And sometimes circumstances we find ourselves in aren't tests from God. God doesn't test you. Sometimes it's our own choices, but then sometimes it's other people's choices, the ripple effect, and we have no control over it. We just are suffering the ripple effect of their choices.
Yeah, we're not reaping what we sow, we're reaping what they have sown.
And that's unfortunate.
Now, saying all that, we are going to say this. Don't be afraid to walk with God.
No.
That we're not telling you that to scare you or to upset anybody from doing what you feel the word is telling you to do.
And Paul wasn't telling them to put fear in them. He was telling them, hey, wake up. You're not bound by the law.
You're
Quit
free.
trying to put everything that God has done in a box.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put it in a box. You don't need to be bound by the box.
Yeah, get happy. That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
You're free. Get happy and walk with God. Just commune with God. Ask the Holy Spirit to guide you, lead you, tell you, and all because of what Jesus has done, and he will. Okay? And we're all going to miss it, so don't get excited about it. We're going to make it. As one guy tells me, we're going to make it. So we're going to make it. But here in the book of Galatians, let's get over there. Okay, Galatia is modern day Turkey, and he's not writing to a specific church. He's writing to a bunch over there. And like I told you last week over in Revelation chapter 2, those 7 churches are here in Galatia. He's writing to
But there were more than that.
Yes.
Those were the 7 main ones, like
Jesus was talking to through John. But get your map out and look at this and get an idea.
Just like there's churches all over in our area and all over the United States, there was churches all over this area and this region.
And make yourself familiar with that and realize this is not just a fairy tale, but this was actuality.
This is historical events that actually took place.
Yes. All right. We find him there, at several different churches. He talks about being at Antioch and Damascus and this and that, and he talks about being there. But in chapter 2 here, he's talking about Jerusalem. Then he's going to go back over into Turkey to these churches and talk again. Paul had to and has to, everywhere he goes, defend who he is as far as an apostle of Jesus. Remember, Jesus called him, chapter 1 talks about that. He explains, he was called to the side for 3 years over in Arabia and Damascus. There Jesus was teaching him. And then he came to Jerusalem and talked with Peter, and then he left again. And then chapter 2 says that 14 years after all that, he went back up to Jerusalem again, him and Barnabas, and he took Titus. Titus was a Gentile. Now, Jesus tore down the wall between Jewish and Gentile. We're all, anybody that's born again, you're referred to as a Jew.
Yeah.
You're in Jesus, Romans chapter 2.
It talks in here about, after Jesus' work, traditional status distinctions no longer hold sway, whether based on gender, ethnicity, or economic status. Jesus' work on the cross made a way for Gentiles as Gentiles to inherit the promises of Abraham. So that divide was crossed. There is no more division between I'm a Gentile and I'm a Jew, because they didn't really get along.
No.
So,
well, there was a separation there, and they had to.
Jesus came and changed everything. And so, he tore that wall of division down. And now, because of Jesus' finished work, there's no division, and everybody can be a Christian.
Right. Even back in Old Testament times when, there was a separation between Gentiles and Jews, if you follow the lineage of Jesus, you'll find that Rahab was in that lineage. You'll find Ruth in that lineage. They were both Gentiles. So God don't care who you are, what color you are, whatever. He created you. He wants you. He loves you. Jesus died for you. So best thing to do is let's just pick it up and move forward in Jesus. Now,
in this chapter, he's talking to the Gentiles, because what has happened is he's established all these churches, right?
They're all Gentile churches.
They're all Gentile churches. And what has happened is you've got some of these religious leaders that are coming and trying to incorporate law into these churches. Okay, now they weren't taught law because Jesus fulfilled the law, okay? So they weren't taught law. They were taught grace under Jesus, okay? These people are coming into these churches and they're trying to establish law. And they're trying to say, you've got to work to get your salvation. You've got to do these works to get your salvation. And Paul is addressing them, and he's like, no, you don't need to be circumcised. You don't need to do this. You don't need to do that. Jesus fulfilled the law. And by going along with this, you're saying that Jesus's work, he didn't fulfill the law, and him coming and everything he did was pointless.
Right.
Is what you're saying by following these teachings. So that's what you've got to think too, and that applies to today. When people try to bind God up in a box, bind you up with law, rules, regulations, works for your salvation, whatever. It's based on your work. No, it's based on Jesus's work. Jesus did the work. He paid the price for you. And that's what you have to understand. You're not bound by law. You're bound by grace. Okay?
Right. Now, we'll get back to chapter 2 here just a little bit and explain some things to go along with what Trinity has said. He said 14 years later I came back up by revelation. He was instructed by Jesus to go back up to Jerusalem and talk with James. Now, James was the pastor of the church in Jerusalem. He was the pastor, okay? Then there was Cephas, which is Peter, okay? And John, who seemed to be pillars and perceived the grace that was given unto me, and they gave to me and Barnabas the right hand of fellowship. Paul went up and explained to them what he was delivering, the message of Jesus to the Gentiles. James, Peter, and John were delivering the message to the Jews, okay? Paul was set apart to go to the Gentiles, okay? He went up there and he explained to them what he was doing, okay?
And he brought Titus with him.
A Gentile with him. And they did not compel him to be circumcised. Now listen, in the temple, okay, you did not enter the temple unless you were, okay?
But that's
they
law.
did not compel him to do it because they knew when that middle wall of partition was tore down when Jesus was crucified, that just opened everything up for everybody. James and John and Peter, they knew that, and was no problem. But then Paul talks about there were some spies or religious Judaizers that came in spying out the liberty that they had, and then they're turning that liberty around to throw people in bondage. Now, if that don't sound like today, tell me what does, okay? You're free, not free to sin, free from it. It's your choice. I can't make you, Trinity can't make you walk the line. No minister anywhere, no organization can make you walk the line. In fact, go ahead.
But when you get in the Word and you start building your relationship with Jesus, and you have that foundation and you're building, you got the building blocks and you're building or whatever, and the more you read and fill your mind with the Word, the more you're going to not want to sin. You know what I'm saying? Like when you first get saved, your bad habits aren't just going to go away like that, okay? You're going to have bad habits, and some of them are going to be hard to break, okay? But the more you get in the Word, the more you draw closer to Jesus, the more you allow the Holy Spirit to teach you, the more you're going to want to break those bad habits. The want to break the bad habits is going to outweigh the want to do the bad habits. Does that make sense?
Well, everybody's looking for liberty, freedom from the thing that bonds you. I don't care what it is, those things that got you bound, and that's what Paul is talking about here. You're free, you're free from all that. Religion will bind you.
Yeah.
Now, we're not against denomination, anything like that. Everybody, I guess, needs a name pegged on them. But I am against the bondage that they throw on people, that you have to dress so. You have to pay tithes or you're under a curse. In other words, saying like Jesus, like Trinity said a while ago, saying that what Jesus done wasn't enough. What Jesus done wasn't enough. Get in the Word and find out for yourself what's going on, and you walk in the Word, because when you stand before God, that guy that's teaching you all that wrong stuff is not going to be standing there with you, and you're not going to have an excuse. You
have to answer for yourself.
Yeah,
and so if you're following along with these wrong teachings and just kind of choosing to be dumb, well, then that's your own stupid fault. I mean, let's get real.
Yeah. Now, I said stand before God. Now, Christians, you're going to stand before God and answer for what? You're not going to answer for anything according to what I can find in the Word. You're going to stand before God, and God's not going to say, you should have done this, you should have done... No. You're going to stand before God, and He's going to say, come on in, because you're born again, okay? So we don't have to walk in that fear. So let's jump back over here in Galatians real quick. It says in verse 11, when Peter came down to Antioch, I withstood him to the face because he was to be blamed. Okay, Paul, he didn't mince words, and he don't mess around with things. So why did he withstand Peter to the face?
It says, in other words, 12. He opposed him.
Mm-hmm. For before that certain people came from James, the church in Jerusalem, you did eat with the Gentiles. Okay, Jews were not supposed to eat pork or anything like that. Gentiles ate anything that crawled, okay? And it's okay, according to when Noah came off the boat, God told him he could eat it. And then, he showed Peter, back when he was talking about Cornelius, all those creatures that came down in that sheet. He said, slay and eat. You can eat what you want.
It says right here, he'd been eating with the Gentiles before certain people came from James. So they came from that church that James was the pastor of in Jerusalem. And when they came, he began to back out and separate himself because he was afraid of the people who promoted circumcision.
Okay. Now, my interpretation of that is, James did not send them people down there.
No.
That's those spies that came in to throw people into bondage.
Into the law. Because remember, Titus went with Paul to Jerusalem and saw James and Peter and John. And he went into the church. They didn't require him to be circumcised or anything.
Right.
And so these religious leaders came, and Peter was a little bit afraid of them.
Peter, even Barnabas, and it says that they separated themselves from the Gentiles and said other Jews as well that were down there. They were all carried away with this and just began to separate themselves from. So Paul confronted him to the face. Hey, you've been here all this time. You've been eating all this stuff that the Gentiles eat and all this and that, and you've been carried on. It
says, if you, though you're a Jew, live like a Gentile and not like a Jew, how can you require the Gentiles to live like Jews? So he's saying you can come here, and when nobody's looking, eat with them and associate with them, and then when everybody's looking, you want to back away? No, that don't right. How are you going to then turn around and say that they don't have to be circumcised and they can, Jesus's work was enough? You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Now, I laughed the way I did because that reminds me of today's church. Sometimes we stand behind the pulpit and we say, hey, this is what the Word says. You do as I say, not as I do.
Yep.
And I'm really glad a lot of people don't do like a lot of ministers stand behind the pulpit and do, because, hey, there's a lot of crap coming out of there. Anyway, there's a change.
Yeah.
This is a year. Things are going to get better and better and better and good. And truth is going to start rising up in individuals. Now, there's a lot of problems going on in the body that hinder coming together, just like this right here. The Jews came in, fed them a bunch of stuff that they didn't.
You have to do this. They gave them a checklist. You have to do this, this, and this, and this, and this before you're going to be accepted.
Yeah, but when he went before James, Peter, and John, they said, hey, everything is great, and gave them the right hand of fellowship, okay? Now there was those that came in that were trying to detour everything. He said, these people here, supposedly leaders, he said, I really just don't care who they are. They can call themselves whatever they want to call themselves. And you can stand up and say, well, I'm a prophet of God and this is what's got to be. I can call myself a donkey. But that don't mean I am one. Shut up, Trent. And stuff like that. I can call myself anything. I can call myself President of the United States.
You can polish a turd, but it's still a turd.
Trent.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Right.
And basically what he's telling them is, hey, you can't have it both ways. You can't tear down the walls when I come and see you and say everything's good and right, and then backtrack when you come to see me and these people, because that's not the way it goes.
Right.
He's basically just telling them, look, no, you quit being afraid of these people. Why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? Jesus fulfilled the law. He broke down the barriers. So stop acting like this. Yeah.
And in the latter part of this chapter here now, he explains, he said, hey, I'm not changing the way I am. I've built this, what Jesus told me to preach about grace. I built this. I'm not going to tear it down just because you want me to, or for me.
You're uncomfortable.
To fit into your little slot. I'm not going to do it. He says, I'm crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live. Yet not I, but Jesus liveth in me, and the life which I now live in the flesh, I live after the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. And then he says, I do not frustrate the grace of God. Now, a lot of times we frustrate. You ever been frustrated? Frustrate the grace of God. I got this right here somewhere in a different translation here. Let me read it to you real quick here. I do not ignore the grace of God. Now, Arlene used to ignore me sometimes when I was talking to her. This is a different type of Bible.
Okay, what verse is it?
It's 21. She used to, when I try to talk to her, or people today, you try to talk to them about certain things, they ignore what you got to say. That frustrates me to no end, and I just shut up. So, if we frustrate the grace of God and we forget what it is,
you ignore it.
What happens? You go back under the law.
Yeah. And then you're back in bondage, and then all those chains that broke free are gonna entwine around you, and you're gonna feel suffocated.
Mm-hmm. Then you're gonna have an emotional battle. You fight. We're being honest. You got an emotional battle. You'll have to fight there to get your head back screwed back on.
Because that's the only weapon that Satan has to use against you. He has no power, no authority, except the authority that you give him. Mm-hmm. And it's your mind. He targets your mind. If he can get you all mixed up in your mind.
And that's what he works on. Yeah.
And that's what he tries to do.
And he wants you away from that grace message.
Yeah.
And
so he's going to try his darndest to get you back into the religious law mindset.
Mm-hmm. Now, what he does, he takes that grace, grace is freedom from it. He'll take that grace and he'll say, you can do anything you want and it's okay. So back under religion to a certain degree.
And then he'll turn around and say, when you make a mistake, then he'll turn around and say, look what you did.
Yeah.
You're no good.
Yeah.
Because you got to work for it.
Mm-hmm. Let me read that verse. Let me finish reading that verse there, and then we'll close this thing up. Verse 23 or verse 21. I haven't written 23 yet. Verse 21, he said, I don't ignore the grace of God, because if we become righteous through the law, then Jesus died for no purpose. Jesus died to set you free. Yep. You are free. Now, I want to say this. We are pretty bold and blunt in certain areas and things we say, not to be irreverent or, hey, look at me, but we want you to open your eyes.
We want to grab your attention and make you think outside the box. Now, because you've been bound on a box for so long. We want you to think outside the box, so we got to be blunt in order to get your attention.
And we're just everyday people, just like everybody else. We work for a living, we do this and that. We are very much blessed by God, and we're not trying to use you as a stepping stone to glorify ourselves. We're using the Word to lift up Jesus and let Him move in you and show you truth. Okay? You got anything else?
No.
All right. Well, you have a wonderful, blessed week. Stay warm, and God's blessings are all over you.
See you guys next week.